5 True Home Alone Horror Stories. 1. Being home alone has always been a mixed blessing for me. On one hand, I relished the solitude, the opportunity to unwind without distractions. On the other hand, it made my mind wander to dark, irrational places. But that night, when I was truly alone, I would come to realize that sometimes there are horrors beyond our imagination. My parents had gone away for the weekend, leaving me alone in our sprawling, isolated farmhouse. It was nice to be home from college, away from the hustle and bustle for a while. Our family home was nestled deep in the countryside, far from the city lights. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only company I had were the whispering winds that rustled through the surrounding trees. As night fell, I decided to make the most of my solitude. I curled up on the couch with a book and a blanket, the only sources of warmth in the vast, dimly lit living room. The wind howled outside, and the rain began to tap a melancholic rhythm on the windows. I was engrossed in my book when I heard it, a soft creaking sound. It was the kind of noise an old house might make, the result of shifting timbers or settling foundations. I told myself that it was nothing, just the house's usual noises amplified by the solitude. But then it happened again, louder this time. It was as if someone was walking through the hallway just beyond the living room. I held my breath and listened intently. The creaking continued, slow and deliberate, like footsteps. My heart pounded in my chest as I mustered the courage to investigate. Clutching the book as a makeshift weapon, I tiptoed toward the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, making me wince at every step. The creaking sounds, however, persisted, as if they were mocking my attempts to be silent. I reached the hallway and peered down its shadowy length. There was no one there, but the creaking had grown louder, now coming from the stairs leading to the second floor. Panic began to set in as I contemplated the impossibility of the situation. I was alone in the house, or at least I should have been. Summoning every ounce of courage, I climbed the stairs, one agonizing step at a time. The creaking became deafening, echoing through the narrow stairwell. My fingers gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. When I reached the top of the stairs, the creaking suddenly stopped. I stood there, trembling, my eyes darting wildly. The hallway before me was empty, the doors to the bedrooms closed. But then, from the end of the hallway, came a soft whisper, so faint I could barely make out the words. It called my name, a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien. Dread washed over me as I realized that no one else should have been in that house. I fled down the stairs and out the front door, not looking back. The rain soaked me to the bone, but I didn't care. I sprinted to the nearest neighbor's house, which took me quite some time. I pounded on their door until they answered. I babbled about the creaking, the whispering voice, and the terror that had enveloped me in that supposedly empty house. I'm sure they thought I was nuts. But the police arrived shortly afterward, and they searched the farmhouse from top to bottom. They found no signs of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. There was nothing to explain the creaking and the whispering voice. Luckily, we were pretty good friends with our neighbors, and they let me stay the night. I never returned to that farmhouse alone at night. The experience had left a mark on me, and I never liked to be alone at night anymore. 2. It was one of those rare nights when my parents were both away on business. I relished the idea of having the entire house to myself, indulging in a night of solitude and freedom. The evening began innocently enough. I ordered some takeout, settling down in front of the TV to watch my favorite horror movies. Rain drummed softly against the windows, providing an eerie backdrop to the on-screen chills. The house was silent except for the occasional flicker of the television. Around midnight, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour, the thunderclaps shaking the house. I decided it was time for bed, planning to cozy up under the covers with a book until I drifted off to sleep. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. The unmistakable sound of laughter echoed from downstairs. It wasn't the laughter of a child nor the playful giggles of a friend. It was low and haunting, like a sinister joker delivered by an unseen presence. My heart hammered in my chest as I hesitated on the landing, debating whether to call out or retreat into my room. I chose the latter, hoping it was my imagination playing tricks on me. I locked the bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my phone tightly. Minutes went by, and the laughter never ceased. It reverberated through the house, growing louder and more menacing. There was no denying it. It was real. Someone was in the house with me. Terrified, I dialed 911, but couldn't bring myself to speak. What would I say? That I heard laughter. It sounded absurd even in my own mind. So, I waited, clutching my phone and praying for help to arrive. Then, the laughter shifted. It was no longer confined to the lower floors. It was right outside my bedroom door, just on the other side of the wall. My blood ran cold as I realized that whatever was producing that chilling laughter was now in the hallway, mere inches from me. The doorknob turned slowly and the door inched open. I could see nothing in the pitch darkness outside, but I felt a presence, an icy breath that sent shivers down my spine. My voice finally returned, and I screamed, unleashing a primal, guttural cry. The door burst open, and I expected to see a face, some grotesque, menacing figure that had invaded my home. But there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, save for the dim glow of the hallway light. Within minutes, the police arrived, their flashlights scanning every corner of the house. They found no one, no trace of an intruder. It was as if the laughter had simply vanished, leaving behind an unexplained horror. I never spent another night home alone after that. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now held a sinister secret, one I could never fully comprehend. The memory of that night still haunts me, a chilling reminder that sometimes, when you're alone in the dark, you're never truly alone. 3. It was a night like any other when my family left for a weekend getaway, leaving me alone in our century-old, sprawling Victorian house. My spouse and his side of the family always go to the beach in the summer, but I'm not a beach person. So, I always stay home and house sit. My own house. Lame, I know. The place had always held a sense of charm and history. The evening started quietly. I ordered some takeout from our favorite Chinese food restaurant, enjoyed a few hours of binge-watching my favorite TV shows, and then decided to retire to my bedroom for the night. The house felt oddly silent without the usual buzz of my family's presence, but I didn't mind the solitude. In fact, I relished it. Around midnight, a strange sound roused me from a deep sleep. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the hallway. At first, I dismissed it as the remnants of a dream, but the persistent noise persisted, growing louder with each passing second. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone and cautiously ventured into the dark corridor. The tapping seemed to be emanating from the end of the hall, near the door to the locked room. It had always been an enigma, that door. We had kept it locked. It was just an old storage space filled with irrelevant junk. The tapping, however, sounded like it was coming from inside that room. My heart pounded as I approached the door. My fingers brushed the ornate doorknob, and it turned effortlessly in my hand. To my surprise, the door creaked open, revealing a room cloaked in darkness. I hesitated on the threshold, my breath catching in my throat. The tapping, now unmistakably rhythmic, seemed to be coming from a corner of the room. I flicked the light switch, and a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling cast a feeble glow over the space. My heart nearly stopped. In the corner of the room, a small antique typewriter sat on an old wooden desk. Its keys moved with a purposeful, deliberate rhythm, striking the paper with a haunting, mechanical precision. It was writing something, a message I couldn't decipher. I watched in a strange mixture of terror and fascination as the typewriter continued its work, the tapping growing louder with each keystroke. The words it wrote began to take shape, forming a sentence that sent shivers down my spine. "Let me out." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. How could this be happening? Who or what was communicating through this ancient machine? Panic overwhelmed me, and I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. I called my spouse, and they rushed back home, their worry etched on their faces. When I told them what had happened, they exchanged knowing glances, their expressions filled with dread. They led me away from the locked room, explaining that it had been locked for generations, for a reason. The room had a dark history, a past filled with unspeakable horrors, and they had hoped to keep it locked away forever. That night, as we sat in the living room, the tapping and the haunting message grew louder, echoing through the house. The locked room held its secrets no more, and the darkness it had concealed for so long had been unleashed. Now, I am left to wonder what malevolent force dwells within that room and what horrors it may bring to our once peaceful home. 4. It was a moonless night when my parents left for a weekend trip, leaving me alone in our old, creaking house. They trusted me, and I was confident I could handle a few days on my own. But that first night would be etched into my memory as the beginning of an inexplicable horror. I settled into the living room, wrapped in a cozy blanket, and decided to binge-watch some TV shows to pass the time. Rain drummed against the windows, creating a soothing backdrop to my evening. The house was silent except for the occasional wind gusts that made the trees outside sway like menacing specters. Around midnight, the power went out. I groaned, annoyed by the sudden darkness. But I knew where the flashlight was, and I fumbled my way to the kitchen to retrieve it. As I returned to the living room, flashlight in hand, I realized something was wrong. Whispers, soft, barely audible whispers, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. I froze, the hairs on my arms standing on end. The whispers were too indistinct to make out any words, but they were there, a disconcerting murmur that sent shivers down my spine. Trying to shake off my unease, I convinced myself it was the wind, or perhaps my imagination. I turned on the flashlight and continued to watch TV. The whispers persisted, seeming to grow in volume and number, as if the very walls were conspiring against me. I ventured upstairs, convinced I could pinpoint the source of the eerie sounds. But the whispers followed me, swirling around my ears like an invisible swarm. It was as if they had taken on a life of their own, and I couldn't escape their haunting presence. As I entered my bedroom, the whispers suddenly coalesced into something more sinister. A voice, distinct and chilling, uttering my name. My heart raced as I scanned the room, my flashlight's beam trembling in my trembling hand. There was no one there, just the shadows that seemed to writhe in response to the voice. It was as if the darkness itself had come to life, forming grotesque shapes that danced at the edge of my vision. I rushed to call my parents, but my phone had no signal. Panicked, I returned to the living room, where the whispers had now transformed into malevolent laughter, echoing through the house like a sinister symphony. I huddled in the corner of the room, clutching my flashlight, as the laughter and whispers closed in around me. I felt a presence, an invisible force, pressing in from all sides. It was as if the very walls were closing in, suffocating me with their unexplainable horror. My parents returned the next day, finding me in a state of shock. They couldn't hear the whispers or the laughter, and they assured me that it was just my imagination. But I knew the truth, that something had visited me that night. Something inexplicable and malevolent that lurked within the walls of our house. I never felt at ease in that house again, and I couldn't escape the lingering feeling that the shadows still whispered secrets I could never understand. The memory of that night still haunts me, a reminder that even in the most familiar of places, there are horrors that defy explanation. 5. As darkness fell, I decided to unwind by watching a movie in the living room. Rain lashed against the windows, casting ominous shadows on the walls. The flickering of the TV seemed to amplify the eerie ambiance. Sometime during the movie, I got up to fetch a glass of water from the kitchen. On my way back, I glanced at the ornate mirror in the hallway. Its elaborate frame held a centuries-old charm, but that night, it held something else, my reflection, but not quite. In the mirror, my doppelganger smiled at me, a wicked grin that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled backward, dropping the glass, and the mirror's image shifted back to my normal reflection. I told myself it was a trick of the light or my tired imagination. But when I turned away and looked back, my reflection remained the same. An evil, grinning version of me. My heart raced, and I dared not look into the mirror again. I tried to distract myself with the TV, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. I could sense those eyes on me, the malevolent gaze from the mirror that seemed to follow my every move. Fear gnawed at my sanity, and I decided to leave the house, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. But when I opened the front door, it was as if I had stepped into a nightmare. The world outside was distorted, a nightmarish reflection of reality. My heart pounded as I slammed the door shut. I was trapped in a house with a mirror that seemed to harbor a malevolent entity. Desperation set in, and I decided to cover the mirror with a sheet, hoping to shield myself from its terrifying power. But as soon as I approached it, the mirror shattered on its own, the glass shards flying in all directions. I recoiled in terror, but there was no time to escape. The shards swirled around me, forming a chilling, ethereal figure. It was a shadowy, twisted version of myself, its eyes filled with malice. It reached out, its cold, spectral fingers brushing against my skin. I screamed as an icy chill enveloped me, and the room seemed to spin. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the living room floor, the shattered mirror now just a broken relic. My family found me later that week, finding me shaken and disoriented. They never believed my story, attributing it to an overactive imagination or a nightmare. But I know what I saw, what I felt. The mirror held a malevolent force, a reflection of a darkness that defied explanation, and it had left an indelible mark on my soul. Which story caught your attention the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Check out my website in the description below to see what I'm writing, and just below that are some suggestions related to what we talked about today. Peace.